All right, hi friends, welcome back to your favorite podcast with purpose. I hope that's true. I have enjoyed doing this. This is our 47th episode, Ethan tells me, so very exciting. We've been at this journey for a while together. I hope it's been good for you. I've truly enjoyed it. This week, I want to talk about something I heard at the Global Leadership Summit and on a podcast, and also T-bills and squirrel suits. At the Global Leadership Summit a couple of weeks ago, I heard Arthur Brooks speak. And Arthur Brooks is one of my favorite authors. He is, for me, a great blend of science and academics with a great communicator and a good storyteller. And so he has this gift, I think, of bringing pretty academic things to life in new ways. And so I really enjoy listening to him. And then also a couple weeks ago, I heard him on a podcast with another of my favorite people, Andy Grammer, and they were talking about some of the same stuff he talked about at the summit, which was what is life? What is happiness? How do we achieve happiness in life? And he broke this down into a couple different formulas that I'll share with you now. So he said, first, happiness is not something that we can create reliably in our life. It's one of these things where if you're chasing it, you're not going to find it because you're going to find a deficit of things. But what we should be working to create in our life is enjoyment, which he said breaks down to three components: pleasure, people, and memory. So are we doing things that we are enjoying in the moment? Are we doing it with people we love and care about? And are we creating memories that we look back on through the years? So we create enjoyment, durable joy in our life by focusing on these three things. We can find satisfaction in what we do by making sure that those things contain an element of hard work and sacrifice. So we feel good. Think about this. When you've done a long day's toil in your yard, doing yard work or something, you built something in your garage, you finished a big project at work, whatever it is, like working hard and knowing that we gave up just a little bit makes us feel good about the end product there. And so this combination of hard work and sacrifice is what leads to satisfaction. And then we find, he says, we find meaning in our life when we can answer two questions. Why are you alive? And for what would you give your life? So why are you alive, and for what would you give your life? And so that's how we can answer this question that a lot of us struggle with, especially maybe in middle age, like some of us. It's like, what am I here for? Like, what am I really doing with all of this time and effort that I'm expending out into the world? What is the meaning of all of this? So it's why are you alive, and for what would you give your life? So there's so much depth to all of these three equations, really. And he's got a whole new book about it, and it looks great. I'm going to get it and read it. Maybe we'll talk about some of it more. But he said something specifically on a podcast that with Andy Grammer that stuck out to me. And he says, for whatever it is that you're doing, without a bit of risk, it's just a hobby. It's just something you're doing only for fun. There is no greater satisfaction that will ever come from that because there's no risk. There's not the bit of sacrifice or hard work. You have to have the risk. And he has some ways to evaluate, like, what's the right amount of risk. But I think that's an interesting thing for us to think about. When in the moments where you feel most alive, most connected to what you are doing, whether that's at home in a hobby or at work, unless there is some element of potential failure or learning or pushing us into a new area where we're not quite sure of our footing and we have to develop skills along the way, we don't feel near as much satisfaction. And so I think he's really onto something with this. It has to be an element of risk. I think about risk in lots of different ways, but two ends of the risk spectrum. One, we think about risk in investing, and like you can be all in like overseas stocks, and that's as risky as you can get, or maybe private equity deals. But on the unrisky side of the equation is like a money market account or T-bills, buying treasury bills from the U.S. government. It's fine. It doesn't certainly feel like a very exciting investing strategy that I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about. So there has to be some level of risk. And for taking on that risk, we experience a greater and greater amount of return. And it's up to each of us to balance, like, how much risk are we willing to take and where does the return justify that or not? And so that's one area that we take risks in. The other thing that I think about when I think about risk is these videos I see online of these guys jumping off mountains without parachutes in these like squirrel suit things, and they just like fly or skim down the side of this mountain going 90 or 100 miles an hour, 10 feet off the ground. It looks exhilarating and terrifying all at the same time, to the point where a lot of times you gotta like wince or you look away because it's like, ugh. One misstep leads to ultimate destruction there. And for me, that's like the opposite end of the spectrum from T-bills. Like, that's like crazy risk that has a risk-reward ratio way out of proportion for me. Those guys, those gals, they probably love it because their risk tolerance is calibrated slightly differently. Okay, so let's put all that together into this package. Without risk, things are just a hobby, but it's up to us to discern the right amount of risk that we need to be taking on to keep ourselves growing and learning, to keep ourselves engaged, to find meaning and purpose and enjoyment and satisfaction in life. But the common element in all of it is we gotta be willing to take just a bit of risk. And in a society that is pretty focused on safety, sure bets, guaranteed outcomes, that is a bit scary. So, where is it this coming week that you need to take just a little bit more risk, that you need to lean in to the potential sacrifice part of that satisfaction equation? I'm not asking you to jump off the side of a mountain in a squirrel suit. But I am asking you to move up the asset classes from the T-bills to maybe some bonds or stocks, and figure out where can you take appropriate, controlled, calculated risks, because ultimately the benefits are so great, not only in terms of business success, but also in terms of how fulfilled we feel in our life, in our work, and the effort that we expend on all of this. Okay, that's it for this week's chat on With Purpose, and now it's time for our planning. We do this every week, and every week we create a purpose-built planner that we link in the show notes or on the website, wherever it is you're finding this podcast. It should be there. And we specifically create these planners for each week that go along with each teaching, and they have 2 questions on them. We'll get to those in just a minute, but we always start our planner in the top left there with gratitude. Because science tells us over and over and over, when we plan from a place of gratitude, when we start with being grateful for the things that we've been given or are blessed with or that have happened to us, we see so much more potential in our world, and we plan so much better. So we start with gratitude. What is it that you're grateful for this week? I'm grateful for the Global Leadership Summit. It's provided me a ton of learning over the last decade, and it's an event I look forward to every year. Flip side of that is, what are you putting off? What are you dreading? What drains the life out of you just thinking about it? Write that stuff down too. Okay. First question, where do you need to take more risk? Where are you playing it safe? All right, second question. It's really two questions, and I'm going to ask you to write both answers in the same box. And I want you to give this some real time, maybe like 5 minutes. I want you to spend a little bit of time thinking about Arthur Brooks' questions around the meaning of life. He asked two. He said, why are you alive? And for what would you give your life? Those are some two pretty dang big questions. But I think they might provide some insight for you. I've been pondering them for the last couple weeks. Okay, that's it for this week's episode of With Purpose. It was fun. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I will see you again next week when we enter into a discussion about diagnostics. Woo! Sounds exciting. We'll see you there.